The United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, commits to a world where every pregnancy is wanted, every childbirth is safe, and every young person's potential is fulfilled. To achieve these goals, all countries need to count their people, project future demographic trends, and plan for their population's well-being. UNFPA helps governments strengthen national capacities to generate and use population data for development. For 5 decades, UNFPA has helped to assure that modern, fast, and robust population data are available and enable people to understand the past, change the present, and plan the future. Collected once each decade, a population and housing census is the most powerful source of data for a country. It provides the single best count of the total population. Detailed social and economic information on every household capture the human stories behind the Sustainable Development Goals and the changing nature of cities, settlements, and families. Where door-to-door census is impossible, UNFPA provides guidance and tools for using satellite imagery and microsurveys to estimate the population. Beyond census, UNFPA strengthens registry systems that gather day-to-day data on births, marriages, deaths, and other vital events. These civil registration and vital statistics systems provide the basis for legal identity and the benefits of citizenship, inheritance, and civil liberties. Across the world, UNFPA modernizes and strengthens population data systems. New digital solutions improve the coverage, timeliness, and accuracy of information and ensure that vital data are not lost in times of conflict or natural disaster. Only with robust data systems can the world know who is left behind and work together to expand life-changing opportunities and guarantee rights and choices for all. At UNFPA, we commit to a world where everyone is counted, because everyone counts.
Welcome, Excellencies, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen from around the world. I'm Sri Srinivasan, your moderator for this session, taking place at the margins of the 2022 High-Level Political Forum, the main platform for sustainable development with the central role in the follow-up and review of implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its Sustainable Development Goals, of course, the SDGs. We're live on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and the UNFPA website. The event is accessible via separate streams featuring simultaneous live captions, Spanish and French streams. These links are in the YouTube descriptions and on the UNFPA website. Please let us know where you're watching from. We'll be featuring select audience comments on the screen throughout the show. I've counted more than 30 countries represented already. I'm so delighted to be here with all of you. This is UNFPA's signature event during the session of the forum, and we will be discussing gender equality, gender data, gaps, solutions, and the targeted investments that are necessary to deliver a more equitable and sustainable world. This important event will demonstrate the criticality of national data to ensuring women and girls are empowered to exercise their sexual and reproductive health and rights for achieving the gender goals. With me today is a dynamic and distinguished panel of speakers, and I'm delighted to introduce them to you all in due course. But first, let me welcome the very distinguished Deputy Executive Director of Management, DDM, of the United Nations Population Fund, Mr. Ib Peterson, to officially welcome the session. Welcome, sir. You now have the floor.
Thank you very much, Sri, and good afternoon, good evening, Excellencies, esteemed colleagues and participants and friends from all over the world, all protocol duly observed. It's really a pleasure to open this event, as was said, the UNFPA flagship event during this year's high-level political forum, where we are considering, exactly as was said, how far are we on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and SDGs after and building back from the coronavirus. virus. And it's been very important high-level political forum session in the Sustainable Development Goals review cycle, because the gender goal, SDG 5, is undergoing in-depth review for the second time since the adoption of the 2030 Agenda back in 2015. So indeed, this is an important session for UNFPA, but certainly also for the international community as a whole, as this year's SDG progress report notes that, first, the very viability of achieving SDGs by 2030 is at risk. Secondly, years of development progress have been halted or even reversed as a result of multiple and interlinked global crises. And thirdly, progress towards the goal on gender equality remains insufficient. Women and girls remain disproportionately affected by discriminatory laws and norms, lost jobs and livelihoods, derailed education, increased burdens of unpaid care work, limited political and economic participation, violence, and disruptions to health services. We all know that the empowerment of women and girls must be at the heart of any and all sustainable development efforts. Gender equality is an accelerator for sustainable development progress, and it's critical to meeting other SDGs, actually all other SDGs, and the goals and the objectives of the 2030 Agenda. And clearly the world is not on track to deliver the gender goal by 2030. Globally, only one of 18 indicators for SDG 5 is what we call close to target, and only 48%, less than half of all gender data required to track progress on SDG 5 actually exists. Data collected has confirmed a shadow pandemic of gender-based violence, and estimates also reveal that with more girls out of school, an additional 10 million child marriages and 2 million female genital mutilation cases may occur within this decade. At any time, this is unacceptable, but it's especially unacceptable in this decade of action. Even prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the high pace of population growth in countries where child marriage and female genital mutilation are common is outpacing the efforts to stem and eliminate these harmful practices. So friends and colleagues, there's a clear and urgent need for sustained investment and innovation in gender equality efforts and in the gender data architecture. To this end, UNFPA has invested heavily in innovative approaches to tracking and addressing the SDG 5, as we also saw in the video. It includes new data products and partnerships that are helping more and more governments map where progress is stalled and where women and girls are left behind. And we will hear more about this from our distinguished panelists today. Indeed, there is no building back better for women and girls without targeted investments in gender data, in policies and in programs that uphold bodily autonomy by eliminating gender-based violence and harmful practices. And these investments will not only yield significant cost benefits, they are essential to turning the tide on the gender goal and accelerating SDG progress across the board. We will also hear about the importance and impacts of targeted investments from our panel today. So let me conclude these opening remarks by underscoring that there can be no sustainable development without gender equality, and no gender equality without upholding the bodily autonomy, rights, and empowerment of women and girls. In this current climate, we must redouble our efforts to uphold the rights of women and girls with good quality gender data and smart targeted investments. Once again, welcome to you all, and I wish us all a successful and enriching session. Thank you very much. Back to you, Sri.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peterson, for those elucidating and powerful remarks. We hear you loud and clear when you note that there can be no sustainable development without gender equality, and no gender equality without upholding the bodily autonomy, rights, and empowerment of women and girls. With 8 years left to go in this decade of action to deliver the SDGs by 2030, it is imperative that we redouble our efforts and work collectively as a global community to uphold and fulfill the rights of women and girls. and that countries are able to track efforts and progress with quality gender data and to target resources even more effectively. As a reminder, everyone, we're live on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and the UNFPA website. The event is accessible via separate streams featuring simultaneous live captions, Spanish and French streams. If you leave a comment in the chat, we might feature it on screen, and we'll look at a couple just now. And one of you asked if you'll be able to see these comments after, you'll be able to see the video after. Yes, the entire video will run on all those platforms as well as the website. Here, greetings. Roberto from Mozambique says hello, and Imran from Uganda. And just so great to see people from all over the world joining us. Abdul Rahman from Yemen, welcome. Thank you, everybody. Tell us where you're watching from. Lovemore, journalist from Malawi. This is so nice. We'll keep playing these comments, and we'd like to hear your questions and your comments as well. And Dr. Farhan Ali from Djibouti, welcome. And we're so delighted to have you with us. Now let's move on to the country panel segment of the session, during which we will hear reflections and realities from Madagascar to Malawi, and from Switzerland and the Lao People's Democratic Republic. It's indeed a diverse and distinguished group of speakers, and we will begin this session with a recorded message from Her Excellency, Mrs. Princia Sofiliera, the Minister of Population, Social Protection and Promotion of Women in Madagascar, who will share her reflections on the situation and progress in her country on SDG 5.
Mr. Deputy Executive Director, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to take part in this meeting organized by UNFPA on the margins of the high-level political forum on sustainable development with a view to accelerating progress on the MDG 5 through data and targeted investments. Now, Madagascar, like other African countries, has joined the global consensus reached at the Nairobi summit in November 2019 on the urgency of advancing the promises of the International Conference on Population and Development on universal access to sexual and reproductive health and rights for all, women's empowerment, and gender equality, so as to leave no one behind. Significant progress has been made in policy and legislative reforms. Law number 2019-008 on gender-based violence has been adopted, and its implementation decree is under review. Madagascar has developed advanced and mobile strategies to reach landlocked populations with integrated sexual and reproductive health, family planning, and gender-based violence services in areas where we do not have adequate infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, gender-based violence persists in Madagascar. 1 in 3 women is a victim of physical violence, and nearly 1 in 5 women experienced sexual violence in 2018. A study conducted by UNFPA in 2020 shows that the prevalence of gender-based violence has increased with the COVID-19 pandemic. More and more cases of sexual and gender-based violence have been reported to the legal advice centers and through the media and social networks. The fight against gender-based violence is one of the priorities for Madagascar's emergence. To achieve this, the government has received support from UNFPA to develop an investment framework for the achievement of 3 transformative results by 2030, namely elimination of preventable maternal deaths, elimination of unmet need for family planning, and the elimination of gender-based violence. In my presentation today, I would like to focus on the investments needed to end gender-based violence in Madagascar by 2030. The investment framework for the elimination of gender-based violence is based on 3 scenarios. The first scenario is based on a status quo assumption of maintaining the current geographical coverage of strategic interventions during the period 2022-2030. The second scenario is based on the realistic assumption of halving the prevalence of gender-based violence from 35.8% in 2021 to 18.9% in 2030. Now, the third and much more ambitious scenario aims to achieve 0 gender-based violence by 2030. This scenario is based on the strong assumption of 100% geographical coverage for all of the key strategic interventions identified. Ladies and gentlemen, the overall cost of the investment framework under the second realistic assumption is $152 million with a return on investment of 6,760,758 cases of gender-based violence averted. The overall cost is $201 million under the strong hypotheses corresponding to the elimination of GBV by intimate partners by 2030. Under the no change scenario, the total cost is estimated at $95 million with little return on investment. Under either scenario, women's economic empowerment is the largest area of investment, accounting for almost half of the overall cost. In order to ensure the implementation of the investment framework for the elimination of gender-based violence, the Ministry of Population, Social Protection, and Advancement of Women opts for an integrated approach to development programs in Madagascar. This means integrating gender strategies and the fight against gender-based violence into the country's sectoral policies and programs. And this approach is also accompanied by advocacy actions, and they aim to increase government spending for gender equality and the fight against GBV until 2030. Secure additional funding within the framework of official development assistance, exploring innovative financing based on diversified taxation or social investment strategies through private companies. Now, the government of Madagascar remains determined to move forward with the agenda to combat gender-based violence and is counting on its development partners to mobilize the necessary resources. The government is seeking to diversify its domestic resource base by identifying innovative financing approaches to achieve results for the beneficiaries. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for your attention.
Our warm thanks to the Honorable Minister for the detailed overview of the situation in Madagascar and the significant efforts that are being made towards a fairer and more equitable world, which is what we all want to see, of course. The Minister regrets that she could not deliver her remarks in person, but is ably represented by two senior government officials, Dr. Rova Rabatiliana, Director General of the Promotion of Women Madagascar, and Mrs. Patricia Miarisoa Rakotinirina, Secretary General of the Ministry of Population Madagascar. Excellencies, we thank you for your presence here today. Listening to the powerful remarks we just heard from UNFPA's DD, as well as the remarks from Her Excellency, the Minister for Madagascar, it is clear that the world cannot move forward sustainably or build back better without gender equality and the full empowerment of women and girls. And yet the scourge of gender-based violence continues to grow, as we've seen before, during and following the COVID-19 pandemic. Given the pervasive nature of GBV and the alarming statistics from all over the world, let us now hear perspectives on gender-based violence and the importance of comprehensive sexual education from Switzerland. As a reminder, we're live on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, the UNFPA website. The event is accessible via separate streams featuring simultaneous live captions, Spanish and French streams. You can leave comments and we'll read some right now. It's so great to have all of you here. Hulda says, yes, SGBV is on a rampage, especially in Africa. We have other comments as well. Payong is watching from Cameroon on LinkedIn. And Julia, good afternoon from New York City. Welcome. Powerful speech, says Kalobwe from Zambia. We are going to continue to put on your comments. Please tell us where you're watching from and what is on your mind. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite our next speaker, the Honorable Ms. Sylvie Durer, Director of the Federal Office of Gender Equality in Switzerland, to share her perspectives with us. You're most welcome for being here. Thank you so much. The floor is yours for the next 5 minutes.
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, earlier today, Switzerland published its most recent figures concerning abortions. It is therefore the occasion for us to underline once again the importance of sexual and reproductive rights as human rights. It is our duty to protect them because they are essential in achieving gender equality, the fifth SDG. Comprehensive sexual education is of public interest and central for the promotion of female, maternal, and child health. It also contributes to the prevention of sexual abuse, disease, and unwanted pregnancies. In Switzerland, all children and young people receive sex education. Access to up-to-date information give children and young people confidence and promote the development of a healthy relationship with sexuality. Our government therefore supports the provision of age-appropriate information on sexuality to children and adolescents, including in schools. Thanks to our experience in sexual education and access to family planning services, Switzerland has one of the lowest rates of abortion. Nowadays, we observe 6.7 abortions per 1,000 women, which occur mainly in the first weeks of pregnancy and through medication. In our country, this rate is slightly higher among women of foreign nationality. It seems that these women have had, unfortunately, less access in their country to sexual health education and support. The ability to choose whether to have a child or not is a major issue. In Switzerland, the burden of unpaid childcare falls mainly on women. This complicates their access to the labor market and limits their economic autonomy, but also their possibility to escape from a situation of domestic violence. In Switzerland, although the number of homicides is low, nearly half of them are committed in a domestic context, and 9 out of 10 victims are women. In addition, more than 80% of the victims of all sexual violence are women. Violence against women is the most pervasive, yet often least visible, human rights violation in the world. Switzerland has been committed for many years to fighting domestic violence and violence against women. Ending gender-based violence is a top priority of our 2030 National Gender Equality Strategy, which our government recently adopted. Since last year, we have a new amount of 3 million francs to support projects which come from local authorities or the civil society. We have to start the prevention of violence within the couple at a young age. That is why we support projects such as Going Out Together and Respecting Each Other, which aims to prevent abusive behavior in intimate relationships between young people. Raising awareness among young people to gender stereotypes, abusive behavior, and giving them access to comprehensive sexual education is a key to moving towards true gender equality. Finally, to implement effective public policy on equality, we need reliable gender-specific data. Data collection is not merely a technical issue, but a powerful tool for targeted policy making. Without quality and timely data, we simply fly blind. We must thus continue to make efforts to collect data and to adopt evidence-based and effective policies in order to achieve SDG 5. Switzerland is committed to it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Durer, for your comprehensive intervention, eloquently linking two of the goals under review at this HLPF session, SDG 4 on education and SDG 5 on gender equality. The impact of the pandemic has been so clearly felt across sectors, with women and girls bearing the brunt, from violence to time poverty, decreased employment, and increased burdens of unpaid care work. Indeed, without concrete policies and programs which support good choices and bodily autonomy, fighting gender-based violence and harmful practices like child marriage and female genital mutilation, critical targets under the gender goals SDG 5.2 and 5.3, and empowering women and young people to live their lives to their full potential, we cannot fully recover from this pandemic or reach the SDGs by 2030. The benefits of giving all people, particularly young people, young girls, the tools to make informed decisions to protect and advocate for their health, well-being, and dignity by providing them with safe spaces free from violence within which they can thrive and reach their fullest potential is clear. This is the path to sustainable development for us all, investing in individual and collective human rights for women and girls, of young people, of all people. Folks, as you're watching from around the world, tell us where you're watching from. Tell us your thoughts on these very important topics. We want to hear from you. We're getting such great comments. Here's Mono. Thank you, Switzerland, for taking action and commitment to achieving SDG 4 and 5. Abdullah says, wow, so great. And we see so many comments. Kuku says, education is the base to fight GBV. It is so important that we continue to hear from you as you are doing your part all over the world. Such great comments. Thank you for sending your thoughts, and please continue to do so. Yes, we need safe spaces, and this is a motivational webinar, and we need investment through program of education. All right, now I'd like to invite the Honorable Ms. Sisambon Onavong, Director General, Department of International Cooperation, Ministry of Planning and Investment of the Lao People's Democratic Republic, to take the floor to share her perspectives on the power of SDG 5.6, on ensuring universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights for all, for promoting social, political, and policy change. For instance, we know that Laos will be including questions to measure SDG Indicator 5.6.1 on women's decision-making in the upcoming Laos Social Indicator Survey, LSIS, for the very first time, and that Laos also scored 96% on SDG Indicator 5.6.2, which measures laws and regulations that guarantee full and equal access to sexual and reproductive health care, information, and education. Can you share how Laos managed to achieve all of these and in such an enabling environment for women to realize their sexual and reproductive health and rights? Madam, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator and all delegates. In LAPDR, the Ministry of Planning and Investment is designated to coordinate all work around ICPD. At this time, it is my great pleasure and honor to share with you some of our work during this session. With regard to the law and regulations to enable women and men's full and equal access to social reproductive health, information, and services, the government of LAPDR has created conducive policy environment for the legal and regulatory framework for sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights, as well as women's reproductive decision-making. As per the 2021 State of the World Population Report, Laos scored 96 per 100 on laws and policies protecting sexual and reproductive health. Examples of the laws and policies in place: Laos Constitution's Law on Women and Development, Law on Preventing and Combat Violence Against Women and Children, Family Law, Policies and Strategy and Action Plans on Sexual and Reproductive Health, Youth Law, amongst others. Concerning the evidence-based monitoring on SDG 5.6.1 on women's decision-making on sexual reproductive health, the government of LAPDR has conducted and provided a number of national surveys to provide the quality and disaggregated data. However, for the data to monitor SDG 5.6.1 on women's decision-making on SRHR, Laos does not have data on this critical indicator. With the technical guidance from UNFPA Country Office in LAPDR and other UN agencies, the government, through the Laos Statistics Bureau, plans to include the questions on the SDG 5.6.1 on women's autonomy and empowerment in the upcoming Household Survey or the third Laos Social Indicator Survey, LSIS or mix this year. Data from the survey will provide baseline data for tracking SDG for all the country and will provide evidence of women's empowerment in decision making regarding their sexual and reproductive health. We strongly hope that to get continued technical support from our development partners and countries to exchange knowledge and experience on the collection of the data to monitor the progress of the SDG 5.6.1 indicator. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very, very much for your comments. And as you can see, we're hearing from people all over the world as they're listening to you live. We thank you for your perspective. Our congratulations to you and the government and people of Laos for taking such proactive and promising steps towards upholding the rights and choices of women and girls in Laos and building the gender data infrastructure to enable informed policy choices. There are indeed lessons to be learned from the Laos experience. As a reminder, everyone, we're live on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and the UNFPA website. And the event is accessible via separate streams featuring simultaneous live captions, Spanish and French streams. Please continue to post your comments. We're going to look at some of them now. It's so great to have all of you here with us. Marta says the best way to accelerate progress is open opportunities, because that is a sense to give education if people are not able to share their knowledge. Education must be connected with opportunity. Very well said, Marta. So many great comments coming in from all over. Lamson says, greetings from Uganda. Very good presentation from the panelists. We need to double our effort in implementing the necessary interventions on GBV and also integrate collaboration, learning, and adaptation where data plays a great role. We are seeing these comments come in. Thank you very much, Teresa. Progress in gender goals means progress for other goals. So well put. Thank you very much for that comment. It's great to have all of you here. Claire says, empowering women and girls to reach their full potential and building their confidence to make informed decisions about their bodies and health is critical. Absolutely right. We have people watching from around the world, and this video and the entire session will be available as soon as we're done on Facebook, on all the channels you're on now, including, of course, LinkedIn and YouTube and Twitter, and on the UNFPA website. So thank you all for being here, and continue to please post your comments. Speaking about the gender data infrastructure, UNFPA, the Population Fund, is not only the fourth largest supporter of censuses globally. In recent years, the fund has made serious strides in beefing up the population and gender infrastructure and developing innovative approaches to better support countries with significant SDG data gaps, particularly as it pertains to the gender goal SDG 5. Let us now watch an informative video about the UNFPA's population data portal and opportunities to accelerate SDG monitoring and progress that this platform affords us all.
Data for action. The Population Data Portal is your go-to place for the best available geospatial population data. The portal is brought to you by the United Nations Population Fund and its partners. It features data on over 200 indicators on population, reproductive health, and gender equality, providing a new resource for exploring national and subnational progress. Mapping is a core feature of the portal, displaying geo-referenced census and survey data to locate those furthest behind. Find out how many women have access to modern family planning methods in Myanmar. Which Pacific islands are most exposed to flood risk caused by climate change? Whether the census in Uruguay is on track, or how the level of wealth impacts intimate partner violence in Angola's Huige province. This information and much more are available on UNFPA's Population Data Portal. Whether you are already an expert or new to data, the Population Data Portal offers you multiple ways to access data. Browse through our user-friendly visualizations or take a deep dive into our databases to conduct analyses on new or historic data disaggregated to the smallest geographical unit. You can export, download, and print your data and maps throughout the platform. Only with robust data systems can we know who is left behind and work together to expand life-changing opportunities and guarantee rights and choices for all. At UNFPA, we commit to a world where everyone is counted, because everyone counts. Start your data journey with the Population Data Portal now.
Everyone should bookmark pdp.unfpa.org. This is an incredible portal, and I am so grateful that this is there for all of us to use. So please make sure you check that out. We continue to get lots of great comments. Dr. Judy says, very informative, many thanks. And we are still seeing comments from around the world. Paula's watching from Tallahassee, Florida, and Anselme is watching from the Ivory Coast. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Basima says, hunger, water, electricity, and other infrastructures discourage an individual to get education, even if the opportunity was available. Talks about how all of this is connected. Zainuddin is watching from Afghanistan. Thank you for being here. All of you, your comments are so special and so important. Hello from Cameroon. It's essential to accelerate SDGs actions to reinforce gender equality all over the world. Working together is essential. Hashtag leave no one behind. What a great thought and so important. So nice to have all of you watching with us. Tell us where you're watching from, and please share your comments. Now, let me hand over to a country that is very familiar with the Population Data Portal and indeed has leveraged it in the broader context of population and development planning around gender. From Malawi, speaking on behalf of the Honorable Thomas Muntali, Director General and CEO, National Planning Commission, we have Mr. Austin Chingwengwe, Monitoring and Evaluation Manager, National Planning Commission, who will share some experience from Malawi. Sir, we are delighted to have you with us. And now you have the floor.
Thank you, moderator, and thank you, all excellencies. I will quickly share the experience from Malawi, the use of population data portal and also general gender programming in Malawi. First, just to share you how Malawi is progressing with regards to gender programming. Malawi is really committed to achieving gender equality with regards to SDGs. We have domesticated the SDGs in our domestic plans. We have a long-term vision, which we are calling Malawi 2063, which is running from now up to 2063. But also we have now customized the implementation using medium-term development plans, which has well aligned to the SDGs and has domesticated the SDGs. Since our last VNR, which we conducted in 2020, we took lessons and see how we can re-engineering our programming to ensure that we are really committed to achieving the SDGs. And this time we come at the high-level political forum with our heads up, looking to how we have progressed in a few years to ensure that we have achieved around the gender issues. For now, we can talk about improvements we have made, especially looking at the children who got married before age of 15 or 18. We have made improvement on those indicators. And pre-COVID, we were also registering declines in the teen pregnancies, child marriages. But of course, these successes now, they're being threatened with the coming of COVID-19. What we have observed with COVID-19 and specifically the closure of schools, we have seen that now the child marriages as well as teen pregnancies, they have registered a little increase than pre-COVID-19 pandemic. So that's a worrying trend for us. Or we are able now to be talking about this due to some improvements of data issues in our programming. But nevertheless, the challenges in the data systems, they still remain. If you read almost each and every review of SDGs we have conducted, we really still find critical data challenges and data gaps, which is which is hindering us to have a full scope on how we are progressing or which areas we are struggling with. Basically, most of the data which we have, it's at a national level. But when we try to go into disaggregated into sub-national levels, it's where we are having challenges that we can conduct interspatial analysis to really look at who specifically is being left behind. which are the hotspots for us to really zero in with our programming. But thanks to some of the initiatives and programming which are happening around the data ecosystem, we are making strides, but of course the pace is still slow. We would like to really fast track it to ensure that we have a very up-to-date generated data, which enable us to conduct intertemporal and also interspatial analysis to really know how we are progressing from 2016, how are we moving forward towards achieving our set targets. And again, inter-district, interspace, interlocations, how are we progressing? So we are looking at now the population data portal as one avenue which will enable us to achieve all this, to not only track progress, but also to enable us to conduct and develop well-informed, evidence-based programs to ensure that we are really targeting those who are really needing the specific type of development. So Malawi, we are really pressed with the data issues, but we are still progressing. So, but as a country, with the support from different development partners and UN being at the top of it, we are taking a number of initiatives to ensure that data issues, data availability is very key. Some of it which has been including the building capacity of data collectors, especially institutions. Most of the time we have been relying much on the survey data. But now we are progressing to ensure that we also having administrative data, which would enable us to have real-time information, to enable us to intervene right then and there. These are initiatives which have started bearing fruits, of course, at a pilot phase and pilot stage. But we are hoping moving forward, we are going to go flat out nationwide to ensure that we are able to generate data, especially data coming from schools, coming from the police when we talk about gender-based violences, gender coming from community structures. This is some things we are doing. Another thing is now having an integrated management system, which is almost now completed, which will collect the information from different players. What we have noted within the data ecosystem is that we have different players with different type of data. And for one person or one institution to access this data and make informed decision has always been a challenge. But so as a country, we are different stakeholder institutions coordinating to ensure that we link all these databases which hold data, which have variable data, that we can bring all these together as one developmental data system with the leadership of the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development to ensure that such data is easily accessible, it's easily managed and processed. With that, we are hoping we are going to be intervening right and then when issues are emanating. So these are some of the issues, but we are also, as a country, we know there are a lot of millions and millions of data points which we would like. But what we are doing now is try to look at each SDG. What are critical pressure point data which we must collect, we must analyze, we must store and publish routinely? So the exercise has been almost completed where we have identified which critical indicators and which critical data we need at all cost have it in store. So just to share you some of the progresses we are making. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much. We are so grateful to you for sharing the experience and lessons learned from the National Planning Commission Malawi. We see the benefit of using innovative approaches, such as layering with geospatial data, to complement and deepen existing statistical knowledge. As noted by the UNFPA DED, only 48% of all gender data required to track progress on SDG 5 actually exists. More must be done to gather this data and to ensure that everyone is counted so that no one is left behind. Thank you, everyone, for posting your comments. We continue to hear from you, and we love seeing your thoughts. We are so grateful to all of you who are joining us from around the world. Muno says, creating an enabling environment for adolescent girls and women to talk and share challenges is a great step in enhancing SRHR. Great comment there. And yes, child marriages, increased sexual violence, and teenage pregnancies were on their heights in Nigeria too during the pandemic. And that we have seen for sure around the world how much of a problem this is. And it's so important that we continue to hear from all of you and to share your thoughts as we continue our program. Now that brings us to the end of the country panel segment, which took us from around the world, from Switzerland to Madagascar and from Laos to Malawi. We'll now shift gears to update ourselves even more in a brief but really elucidating academic segment, where we will hear about some interesting research and analysis by UNFPA and its academic partners on the cost-benefit ratios of investing gender in SRHR. Preliminary findings include that every dollar invested in ending preventable maternal deaths and the unmet need for family planning by 2030 will bring economic benefits of $8.78 by 2050. So every dollar has a multiplying effect. Every dollar invested in ending female genital mutilation by 2030 will bring economic benefits of $10.13 by 2050. That's 10 times the return. And every dollar invested in ending child marriage by 2030 will bring economic benefits of $33.60 by 2050. That's astounding return. While I know the economists and planners in the room all have their ears perked up even more, let me hand over to the experts behind these numbers so that we may, as they say, hear directly from the source. Professor Bruce Rasmussen will tell us about investing to prevent child marriage in the next few minutes. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being with us. You have the floor.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Sri. It's a pleasure to be here, and greetings, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to present the results of our work on the economic benefits of ending child marriage in support of achieving SDG 5. I've got some slides. Thank you. I'll skip past that one. This work is an extension of our earlier work to estimate the costs of ending child marriage presented in Nairobi in 2019. Those costs of about $35 billion looked quite formidable. This work adds the benefits to the equation so that you can see the immense economic value that would be generated by that expenditure. We estimate these benefits would exceed $5 trillion over the period to 2050. We have used an optimization model that selects the most cost-effective package of interventions for each country, and an employment model which estimates the benefits. Now, I want to use this slide to give you a sense of how our models work. Starting from the left-hand side, we identify from international evidence a package of child marriage and education interventions. These have different effects. The child marriage interventions go directly to reducing child marriage, while the education interventions are basically about keeping girls in school, so they don't get married. Equally, if they are not married, they are more likely to be in school. Increasing the years of schooling, especially getting girls to complete secondary education, has a big effect on girls' job skills and employment opportunities. This leads to increased earnings and higher GDP. Our models estimate the cost of the interventions and the economic value of the benefits in terms of increased GDP. We divide the benefits by the costs and we get a benefit-cost ratio. Before I reveal, although Sri has stole my thunder by giving you the number, but before we go into the benefit-cost ratio, I want to show you one of the most important outcomes of ending child marriage, at least from an economic perspective. It is about keeping girls in school long enough for them to complete secondary education. What this chart shows is estimates of school completions before interventions, they're in blue, and after, in black, for 2030, 2040, and 2050. You can see that the difference between the two takes time to emerge, but by 2050, we estimate that with the end of child marriage, almost twice as many girls would be completing school. This slide shows the total benefits to 2050 based on intervention costs to 2030, divided between the two types of interventions. Sometimes there's a discussion about which matters more, child marriage or education interventions. This would suggest both contribute substantially to the outcome. Child marriage, 40%, and education interventions, a little more than 60%. Well, I was going to present this number as a wow, because 34 for a benefit cost ratio is very high, and it shows the significant economic effect of child marriage. Now, the benefit cost ratio is produced by dividing the total benefits of 5.1 trillion by the cost of the totaling $38 billion. We also estimate that for 2050, 230 million girls would have been saved from child marriage, and 386 additional girls would be completing secondary school. We think these results would be economically transformative. We know from the experience of Western countries that getting more women into the workforce can have a big effect on economic growth. There is no reason that ending child marriage wouldn't also have a very big effect economically for these countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Those are such important statistics, very important, and thank you for sharing them with us. And I don't think your thunder was stolen. Those numbers are so important. Without further ado, I will now like to call on our esteemed researcher to join us, the Senior Policy Analyst at Avenir Health, Ms. Rachel Sanders, who will share her work on the cost-benefit analysis of scaling up female genital mutilation prevention and care programs. Ms. Sanders, you have the floor.
Great, thanks very much. I have a few slides I'd like to share with the group. Thank you. Much like Bruce, I'm going to talk through the methodology of the work and then give you the results, although much like him, the thunder was stolen. So I'm going to be presenting some work that was completed by Avenir Health in collaboration with colleagues at UNFPA. And it builds on work that was completed and presented in Nairobi in 2019 that estimates the costs of delivering a program to prevent female genital mutilation, or FGM, and to provide care and treatment for those who've experienced it, as well as legal protection and legislation around the practice, alongside a program support package. So we look at two scenarios. In the first, there is a scale up of FGM prevention interventions in communities where more than 50% of the population indicate approval for FGM and a desire to continue. We compare that to a counterfactual where there are historic trends which reduce FGM incidence, much like what occurs in the scale-up scenario, but there's no intervention. So the practice is assumed to continue following a similar trend as in the past, but with no hastened reduction, as like what we would see in the scale-up. Now, the total cost of this package of services is estimated to cost $2.8 billion over the years 2022 to 2030. However, the total impact of that package of services is quite large. It's estimated to avert 20 million cases of FGM. This is new cases which would not happen based on the prevention program, which really relies on a social norms approach, which has been shown to have great effect. We look at a series of economic benefits. So as we know, women and girls who have experienced FGM have a range of negative physical and psychosocial outcomes. The economic benefits of averting FGM are estimated in 4 primary domains. First of all, economic, increased participation in the workforce due to years of life gained. Second, social. Women who've experienced FGM have higher, when they go through childbirth later, there's higher rates of stillbirth and neonatal death. And so averting cases of FGM ultimately averts stillbirths and neonatal death when those women go to have children. And it also averts the years of life lost due to those stillbirths and neonatal deaths. Number 3, morbidity. Cases of FGM that are averted improves the quality of life for women who would otherwise have experienced FGM. And finally, there are some costs averted. Women and girls who've had FGM have higher costs for healthcare. And so we look at the reduced costs of care due to fewer cases of FGM. Seen visually here, we convert this investment in FGM prevention into a reduction in numbers of cases. And then for each of those cases, we look at, number 1, the associated morbidity that would have occurred along with those cases. We look at the stillbirths and neonatal deaths averted and the years of life which would have been lost due to those cases. And then finally, those healthcare costs averted, which are prevented when cases of FGM are prevented. These feed into healthy years of life gained and reduced healthcare costs, all of which feed into the economic benefits, which help to offset those costs of prevention programming. So you can see here that the additional costs to prevent FGM, which I already talked about, are around 2.8 billion in additional intervention costs, which leads to 20 million cases of FGM, an estimated 20 million cases of FGM, which could be averted along with the associated costs of care and years of life lost averted. And when we look at these and from an economic perspective, we find that this could accrue nearly 28 billion in economic benefits, leading us to a benefit cost ratio of 10 to 1. So for every dollar invested, we see an estimated potential for $10 in economic benefits which could accrue. Now, this is an average across 31 high burden countries for which we have enough data to analyze this. However, if we look at individual countries and we start to break things down, the implications are different for different countries. So this kind of benefit cost ratio is this high or even higher for countries where there are a few characteristics. Number 1, a high burden of FGM. Number 2, limited historic change. There's not already a significant downward trend. And finally, higher GDP, since we are looking at the economic benefits. And so we find that it's particularly important to invest in these prevention programs in countries with those conditions. When we think about the different types of economic benefits, I apologize, this slide doesn't look great, but when we look at the breakdown, we see that the neonatal deaths averted and the morbidity averted are the biggest drivers of these results, followed by the healthcare costs averted as well as stillbirths. So you can see that this is still an important intervention to keep up despite the competition for resources and the issues that we've seen during the COVID pandemic. And so I hope that this economic analysis can help to make the case for prevention of FGM programs to continue to be funded at the level at which they need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sanders, for sharing this exciting work, which gives us even more impetus to make such targeted investments. It is very clear that beyond the human rights imperative, investing in targets under the gender goal will yield considerable social and economic returns to countries, regions, and indeed to the world. Folks, we're live on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and the UNFPA website, and the event is accessible via separate streams featuring simultaneous live captions, Spanish and French streams. And of course, please leave comments. We're going to read some now. And if you're joining us late, this event will be ready for replay on the same links where you're watching them. As soon as we're done, you'll be able to watch them and catch up on anything you missed. Basima says, rural primitive areas should be included. These are the ones who are left behind. Nowadays, internet and network are very important to get knowledge. And says, hello from Tanzania, welcome. Let's see, Catalina, hello from Colombia. Great tool. She's talking about the population data portal. Data is a key tool for policy making, and I agree with other comments that it's also important to put in place methodologies to share the best practices amongst countries. Everyone, please check out pdp.unfpa.org. That's the population data portal. Amazing work there. And greetings from Senegal. Is a gender specialist and an agronomist. Welcome with us today. Great to have you. Thank you. Warm greetings from Cote d'Ivoire. Welcome. Great to have you. An expert in public health, Einstein. Thank you very much. Muno says sex education is still an inferior topic in many cultures. Age-appropriate group programs for girls and women are creating remarkable impact, and that's very, very nice to hear that, and we have to continue to invest in that. Ido says, let us not forget the boys in SGBV so that they can understand the rights of girls and women in society. We need to make school a gateway to SGBV, and this topic is what we've been talking about. Thank you for bringing up the importance of boys and men here as well. From Zimbabwe, it will be great to develop operational guidelines to scale up male engagement interventions, which are one of the weakest links. The guidelines can be localized by in-country CSOs. Great session. Thank you, says Thembi. Thank you for being with us. And Fernanda is watching from New York City, representing Mexico, or watching on YouTube. Great to have you. We'll read a few more comments. Anna is watching from Panama. And let's see here. Young says, I think continuous awareness raising and information dissemination can and will help curb these gender discrimination issues across cultures and nations. Very well said. And Prosper says, warm greetings from Nigeria. I've concluded a GenU volunteering exercise with UNICEF in collaboration with WHO and NPHCDA on COVID vaccination. Taking the duty of an EMID is indeed a fantastic experience. These comments are wonderful. I agree more must be done to gather data in Africa, particularly in Nigeria. Let's read a couple more comments here. Thank you. Keep those comments coming. That's awesome. We're currently campaigning against the practice of female genital mutilation in Nigeria and can't wait to see it end in Nigeria and Africa at large, something we can all fight for, the end of FGM. And following from Kenya, thank you for being with us. And hello, says Muzaffar from Afghanistan. Bakare says, greetings from Gambia. We'll do one more comment. And Young says, change starts from within our homes. If we cannot start intervention at the levels of our homes, it'll be difficult to do at the community level, and of course, higher than community as well. So the importance of the home in everything we do. Well, friends, you have heard it all. This is why we are here, to share knowledge, challenges, experiences, progress, and opportunities. And I believe we have done just that. It is my task now to wrap up this rich and vibrant series of interactions before I invite Mr. Ib Peterson of UNFPA to bring this memorable event to a close, and we will hear from him in just a few moments. So, friends, the 2022 SDG Progress Report was clear. While progress has been made in building stronger data and statistical systems for SDG monitoring, significant data gaps still persist. Gaps in geographic coverage, timeliness, and disaggregation levels of global indicators make it difficult to understand the pace of progress, differences across regions, and who's being left behind. This is clearly the case for millions of the world's women and girls who, as the UNFPA Executive Director has said on numerous occasions, bear the brunt of the multiple and intersecting challenges the world faces today. We must all make efforts to invest in gender data to ensure that women and girls are not forgotten in our push to build back better. A wise person once said, "You measure what you treasure and you treasure what you measure." Indeed, there is no building back better for women and girls without targeted investments in gender data, policies, and programs that uphold bodily autonomy by eliminating gender-based violence and harmful practices. These investments will not only yield significant cost benefits, they are essential to reversing the backsliding on the gender goal and accelerating SDG progress in this decade of action. Ladies and gentlemen, the case is clear. There will be no sustainable development without gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. Thank you to our distinguished and diverse panel and to UNFPA for bringing this dynamic group of speakers together to make the case for investment in gender data and women and girls. Let's bring the panel back on stage to thank them once again for the contributions to today's event. Thank you, Sisambong from Lao DPR. We were so grateful to have you with us. Austin from Malawi, thank you very much for being here with us. We're so grateful. And Rova from Madagascar, it was great to have you and your colleagues with us as well. And Sylvia, thank you from Switzerland for your comments and for sharing your thoughts. Bruce, thank you for joining us from Victoria University. And Rachel, thank you for joining us from Avenir Health. Everyone, please give a round of applause for our fantastic speakers. We learned so much from them. We really appreciate all of you being with us. Now I give the floor once more to UNFPA Deputy Executive Director for Management, Mr. Ib Peterson, to formally close the session. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Sri, and thank you to our esteemed panelists who spoke here today. Whoa, really a lot of good points made. I'm really impressed. Both of the commitment we heard from governments, the recognition that you need data to really build up targeted, effective interventions, and also not just build up data, and you have to start from somewhere. I think that's actually quite encouraging also to hear. I think our colleague from Malawi also made a very important point. We need to establish data, and we need to ensure access to data from all kinds of decision makers, and of course also from people as such. I think that's a very important point. This is about rights, as we know, as also you said, Sri. It is about ensuring, this is a human rights issue, ensuring gender equality. But it's also a very good investment case, as we heard as well. And I do think we should be able to convince most Wall Street investors, and not least, or maybe more importantly, most finance ministers around the world, that with cost benefits ratios going from possibly 1 to 10 to 1 to 34 over the investment period, this is not only a needed, a necessary, a rights-based approach. It's also what's really underlined what we said at the start here. There will be no sustainable development if we don't invest and ensure gender equality and the rights of women and adults and girls. So thank you very much for that. And thank you to Sri for your very able and dynamic moderation of this session. I think time has been flying, and I think that's very much also we owe it to you. And then I want to thank really our esteemed audience from all over the world, literally, and a lot of good points. This was indeed, I felt, a very interactive forum, as interactive as it can be when we do it like this, but I'm really, very encouraged and actually also a bit humbled that so many people have followed us from all over the world. Many, many good points were made, in particular that you need to get out at the local level and build up also the investments, the recognitions, and I think actually quite of the interventions coming out, the comments from our audience were exactly to the rights, to the need to work with communities to realize the SDGs. Because we are at a very important point in history. We are seeing backsliding on progress against critical SDGs and against human rights, including, not least perhaps, gender equality, backsliding against the rights of choices and rights and choices of women and girls. But at the same time, there is a strong pushback against what we could call a pushback, and even more confident voices emerging in support of rights of women, adolescents, and youth, as we have heard today. And again, just to underline all the things we heard today on innovative approaches in building up the data, building up the investment cases, that's part of this pushback, and this is a very important part. So we are all here in it to rescue the SDGs in this decade of action. And as we live here today, really we must remain energized in this fight for gender equality. Let's continue to work together to ensure that everyone is counted, especially women and girls, and support further efforts to strengthen and prioritize gender data. And let's continue to push for targeted and smart investments to slow and reverse the backsliding we have seen in the last several years. Let's work together to, communicate and bring out the ways that this can be done for decision makers, both at government and local levels. You can count on UNFPA in this continued, very necessary, very hard work, but very rewarding work also. I'm very, very sure about that. And as said by our UNFPA Executive Director, Dr. Khanam, La lucha continua, the fight continues. We are armed with the tools to win this fight we saw today, and we heard about today. We're expanding the data and the evidence base for action. So let's please use them. And I thank you all and have a continued nice day.